Even longtime Hollywood insiders were taken aback by Scarlett Johansson's performance on Saturday Night Live, even though she has never been one to shy away from controversial subjects. She stood up to the microphone under the bright studio lights, addressed Prince Harry and Meghan Markle with an accuracy that seemed less like comedy and more like a cultural verdict, as a live audience buzzed and millions watched from home. It was a painless delivery. The audience went wild at every measured pause and every joke that landed like a well-placed uppercut. But beyond the surface of the jokes, there was a hint of truth, a shared understanding that they weren't funny. Johansson made it plain from the beginning that she would not skirt the issue. She portrayed Harry and Meghan as egotistical superstars who take advantage of a victim complex rather than as misguided ex-royals navigating a harsh world. It all started with the opener. One of Netflix's most beloved former royals has gone full complainer. They went into a fit of hysteria, the crowd going ballistic. The kind of laughter that happens when the truth has been sitting in plain sight and someone finally shouts it out loud. Then followed the sharper jabs. Meghan, she added, could turn a royal wedding into a 3-season trauma series. It was harsh. Yes, but also an unmistakable reflection of how much the public had grown weary of their incessant retelling. That fairy tale wedding, originally billed as a fresh chapter for the monarchy, had turned into the setting for documentaries, podcasts, and interviews all circling the same topic: how unfairly they'd been treated. Johansson didn't have to fudge the truth. She just shone a spotlight on the obvious. The monologue's most biting moment, though, wasn't about tiaras or palace drama. It was about accountability. She slid into a joke about Meghan's do-it-yourself bath salt concoction featured in a Netflix series now at the heart of a lawsuit. After a woman apparently suffered severe burns, no euphemisms, no softening the edges. Johansson called it what it was and left the audience in that ideal mix of shock and amusement. NBC ran every second without so much as a bleep, disregarding alleged pleas from Meghan's team to pre-approve any comments. For Meghan and Harry, this wasn't just a horrible PR moment. It was a full-on loss of control. For years, they'd carefully maintained their public image, determining when and how they were talked about. Now, the story had slipped through their fingers, and late-night humor was guiding the debate. When satire stops fearing reaction, it's a clue that the cultural tide has turned. Johansson's performance touched into something deeper than a 4-minute TV spot. It echoed a trend that had been developing for years. After the tell-all interviews, the multi-million-dollar deals, and Harry's memoir that read like an unedited therapy diary, the public mood had altered. Where there was one sympathy, now there was exhaustion. Now there was fatigue. The couple's issues had gone from newsworthy disclosures to predictable beats in a story folks felt they'd previously heard too many times. The true sting came from how universal the laughter felt. It wasn't simply the normal anti-Sussex bunch nodding along. It was the type of wide, nonpartisan mocking that suggested their image had cracked across the board. In Hollywood, that matters. When A-list comedians start roasting you without consequence, the industry takes note. Executives, agents, and producers pay close attention to audience reactions, and the reaction here was quite clear. No one was running to defend them. By the end of the monologue, Johansson had done more than deliver a few jokes. She'd publicly shattered the carefully built atmosphere that had enveloped Harry and Meghan since their royal leave. The praise wasn't just for her timing. It was for the freedom to finally laugh at two people who for so long had been viewed as untouchable. The fallout didn't merely spread through social media feeds. It slammed into the closed-door places where reputations are measured in financial potential. In the days after the monologue, Hollywood insiders began passing the footage around like a litmus test. At CIA and WME, two of the top talent agencies in the business, executives apparently observed the audience's reaction on repeat. The laughter wasn't courteous or timid. It was full-throated approval. One top agent was harsh. If Scarlett could go there and get cheers, so could anyone else. That statement alone was harmful for the Sussexes since it marked the elimination of an unspoken industry civility. For years, Harry and Meghan had been shielded by a kind of cultural force field. Even if you didn't like them, you kept your critiques vague, your jokes gentle. That was the unwritten norm. Now that shield had cracked. The industry's appetite for preserving them wasn't just dwindling. It had flipped totally. Being affiliated with them was starting to seem like terrible business. Quiet whispers began circulating. They were box office poison. Not in the literal sense of a failed movie, but in the broader sense of generating the wrong type of attention. Scarlett's roast had another dimension of impact. It embarrassed their allies. The punchlines didn't only target the pair, they called out the media figures, celebrities, and corporate partners who had stood by them through every controversy. Suddenly, defending Harry and Meghan appeared less like loyalty and more like complicity. In an image-focused town, that's a death sentence. No one wants to be the last one holding the bag when the public turns. The Netflix boardroom apparently felt the sting most. The corporation had spent millions into the Sussex brand, counting, on their royal aura to generate prestige material. But in reality, their projects had transitioned from cultural events to niche gossip fodder. Viewership increases on release were followed by dramatic drop-offs, and critics were openly criticizing the output. Scarlett's jest about surviving in a $14 million mansion was more than a gag. It crystallized a criticism Netflix management had been hearing in private. The couple's narrative had gone from inspiring to excessive. Archewell, their humanitarian brand, didn't escape untouched either. Johansson's comment about it sounding like a spa for egos was harsh, exactly because it rang true. Public documents have already shown the organization spending significantly more on PR than on actual charitable grants. What was meant to be their moral anchor suddenly appeared like a vanity business. Forbes followed up the theme days later, releasing a piece that questioned what exactly Archewell had achieved since its start. The fact that a comic piece could provoke serious journalistic examination was proof the pair had lost control of the debate. Even their personal connections were exhibiting signs of strain. Sources close to Beyoncé's management team made it clear there was no ongoing commercial relationship despite Meghan's earlier attempts to draw on their brief public interactions for legitimacy. Other high-profile pals stayed mute, a silence that spoke volumes. When the tide swings in Hollywood, pals don't stick around to fight. They vanish. Inside Archewell's own offices, there was an increasing sense of panic. Staffers realized that being lampooned was one thing, but having that mocking reverberate across demographics was another. Late-night satire was no longer a fringe menace. It was a cultural weather channel showing exactly where public feeling was moving. And in this case, the wind was roaring against them. Scarlett hadn't just cracked a few jokes. She'd reset the power dynamic. Harry and Meghan weren't dictating the terms of interaction anymore, and in an industry founded on perception, that shift was dangerous. The sharpest cut came when the jokes started disclosing details the pair would rather keep buried. One of the night's most famous lines took aim at Prince Harry's living arrangements and citizenship status. Johansson delivered it with a smirk. A man who's written a book bashing his family moved to California, enjoying all the pleasures of living in America but still hasn't filed for citizenship. The connotation was plain. He wanted the rewards without the burdens. Legal analysts soon picked up on it, pointing out that his visa status, tax liabilities, and potential use of diplomatic exemptions had long been uncertain. The line converted an abstract dispute into a talking point that reached well beyond comic circles. For Meghan, the scrutiny was equally searing. The bath salt lawsuit joke wasn't just a cheap laugh. It was a direct knock on her carefully built image as a lifestyle authority. Here was a Duchess-turned-wellness guru now accused of peddling a product allegedly related to grave injuries. That the dish had been included on her Netflix show made the problem extremely harder to ignore. Scarlett didn't manufacture the story. She reduced it into a single scathing statement that stripped away the sheen and left the underlying chaos in plain view. The larger effect was harsh because it undermined the couple's control over how their generosity, initiatives, and personal choices were seen. Their foundation's tax papers were suddenly buzzing online. People who'd never read a single financial declaration were posting images revealing Archewell's uneven expenditures, where PR bills surpassed charitable gifts. The quip about sending your ego to detox had become shorthand for what detractors were calling their entire operation, a glittering veneer with little behind it. Inside the media industry, this was seen less as a celebrity flap and more as a moment of exposure. Late-night comedy had done what properly crafted op-eds and investigative pieces couldn't. It made the criticisms amusing, repeated, and easy to comprehend. You didn't have to be passionately immersed in royal gossip to grasp the joke. It was approachable, universal, and damning. The pushback didn't come in the shape of furious mobs. It came in quiet. Phone calls went unanswered. Invitations stopped arriving. Meetings with possible collaborators were postponed indefinitely. PR veterans call this the social cold shoulder, and it's often more devastating than a frontal attack because it removes the oxygen of relevancy. Without public allies to prop them up, the Sussex brand started seeming less like a misunderstood power couple and more like a burden. The entertainment industry's reaction sealed the transition. Writers, producers, and executives who long saw them as a safe option for projects began evaluating the danger. If Scarlett's jokes were resonating this deeply, it meant any future venture could be swamped by the criticism. In an industry where image is cash, associating with someone whose name provokes more eye rolls than cheers is a chance few are willing to accept. What made the entire episode so heartbreaking was that it didn't rely on leaks or startling revelations. It was all pulled from public knowledge. The couple's own choices, their own assertions, their own financial records. Scarlett had simply put the jigsaw pieces in a way that displayed the picture they'd been trying to keep blurred. By the time the clip had concluded its viral run, the message was evident. The jokes weren't isolated punches. They were the public's verdict. And in the court of cultural opinion, Harry and Meghan weren't walking away with pity. They were going away as the punchline. Their reputation tarnished not by a political hit or tabloid slander, but by 4 minutes of brutal humor that revealed the truth a bit too well.